innovative financing instruments for resilient food systems. My name is Dina Saleh. I am the Regional Director for the Near East, North Africa, Europe division at IFAD. And it is my pleasure to guide us through this important discussion on financial innovations and partnerships that strengthen climate resilience in our food systems. A sustainable food system lies at the heart of our common goals to end hunger and achieve food security by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, transforming food systems to withstand climate challenges will require at least 1.3 trillion annually until 2030. So we do have, and we are facing constraints by ODA due to tight public budgets, financial innovation is critical. Today's event could not be more timely. Transforming food systems to withstand climate change demands urgent action and collaboration across sectors. As I said, with 1.3 trillion needed annually until 2050. Innovative financial instruments are crucial in meeting this need, especially as we see that public funding alone is not enough. In this session, we will explore how innovative financing involving development banks, the private sector, and other financial entities can drive impactful investments for a sustainable future. To start, it is my honor to introduce IFAD's President, Alvaro Lario, for his opening remarks. President Lario has been at the forefront of advocating for climate finance solutions that prioritize resilience, sustainability, and inclusive growth. Welcome, President Lario.
Thank you very much, Ina. And it's a pleasure to be here with you today to discuss about what are the potential solutions to really deploy innovative financial instruments to ensure resilient food systems. And global food systems can be defined in many ways. Indeed, we have been over the last years trying to see what type of investments can really make food systems resilient. They're a complex network of inputs, processing, and outputs. And they're not only a source of nourishment, but it's also acknowledged that it's also a source of pollution. Overall, over the global economy, they form a sector that is worth 10% of the global economy. And at the same time, the World Bank estimates that the failures associated to these food systems cost us around 6 trillion a year in terms of malnutrition, health, waste, and other costs. Half of the food produced by these systems comes from small family farms in developing countries, farms under 5 hectares, but these farmers tend to be at the same time extremely poor and often even hungry themselves. We also know that they receive around 6.5 cents for every dollar of the products that they sell. So we can see that food systems still don't do their most basic job, that is to provide enough nourishment to everyone on the planet. With climate change driving crop failures, food price rises, and extreme weather events, the cost will only become more obvious. And climate change, we all know it's already a slow-moving catastrophe, but only if we let it be. Because there's also, and this I hope the panel will be also an unprecedented opportunity to see how we can reshape how the global financial architecture is supporting these food systems and food security. There is a clear business case for investing in climate adaptation for small-scale farmers, and our own analysis indicates that it's the figure that is approximately needed every year for investments to cover the climate adaptation of small-scale farmers is around $75 billion. We know it's one of the hardest sectors to attract private capital, but we are committed to do so, and we are already doing so. That is, currently we are using the fact that we are not only a specialized agency, but also a financial institution to de-risk, to blend the concessional financing, to develop guarantees also for local financial institutions, to mobilize further financing for small-scale farmers, and also to work on microinsurance models that can be adapted to small-scale farmers. In addition, and given that we have also shown with us today, I wanted to highlight that we're also mobilizing money from pension funds to the issuance of sustainable bonds. In our last cycle, 650 million. In the next cycle, around 1 billion. And we are the first United Nations agency actually to have 2 credit ratings, 2 AA+, And we have a sustainable financing framework where we are actually connecting many of our investments to the SDGs. So this is actually for us transformation of rural economies in action. Today we are launching a COP, the Climate Action Report 2024, which highlights some of the successful examples of projects supporting small-scale farmers in their efforts to adapt to climate change, but also to protect ecosystems, work with nature, and promote sustainable agriculture. We hope that this report will inspire even more investments. For us, COP today is a call to action to radically overhaul our food systems so that they are more inclusive, fairer, more resilient, and less damaging to our planet. And with the adaptation market expected to be worth 2 trillion by 2026, this is far from only a moral proposition. It is also a value proposition that is equipped to deal with climate change, respect nature, and be profitable for every actor along the value chain. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Lario, for your insightful remarks, also putting a spotlight on the role of smallholders and the important role that they play, but also the vulnerabilities, and what IFAD is doing to really mobilize the resources and continue to champion for these smallholder producers. With that, I'm also equally excited now to move on to our esteemed panel, which I will introduce briefly. And of course, as you listen to them, you will know more about the work they do. To start with, we have our Mr. Simon Connell, who is the CEO of SNV since 2020, a seasoned leader in global development with over 25 years of experience across diverse continents, and he's passionate about equitable access and sustainable chain. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, Simon. Welcome. The second panelist is Jay Collins, who is the Vice Chairman for Banking, Capital Markets and Advisory at Citi, with a 30-year career advising on finance and global policy. So you've worked also as a climate finance advisor, and we're really looking forward to hearing some of your thoughts on this subject. Elvina Garayeva is an experienced impact investor and sustainability professional, and currently serving as the Director of Debt for the Eastern Europe and Central Asia region at Incofin Investment Management. And she has over 15 years of experience in environmental and as well as sustainable finance across Europe and the CIS countries and Balkans. Thank you for joining us, Elena. We look forward to hearing from you as well. And our last speaker, but not least, of course, is Sean Kidney, who is the CEO of the Climate Bonds Initiative, an international NGO working to mobilize global capital for climate action. And you oversee green bonds, so you heard President Lario talking about some of our sustainable bonds and programs on 6 continents. You've worked on green taxonomy development, so these are all very important solutions, I think, for the subject that we have at hand today. With that, I will turn my first question to you, Simon. So how do you envision innovative financing mechanisms to contribute to resilient food systems? And what role can development partners play in promoting these models?
Great, thank you, Dina, and pleasure to be here. Welcome, hello to all of you. Thank you, friends at IFAD. I think what I'd like to say is really twofold, possibly even threefold. On the first point, we're seeing very, very significant and increasingly alarming constraints on official development assistance financing. The country where I am based, the Netherlands, is projected to cut its ODA contribution by 2.4 billion in 2027, with cuts over 2025 and 2026. Many other countries are looking to make similar cuts. So we've got big constraints on ODA financing. We have a number at the same time of very innovative financial instruments out there. And my organization, SNV, we're hugely proud to be involved with the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, with FMO, which started with an initial investment of 180 million euro from the Dutch government that's now been increased to approximately €500 million or a bit under of financing through the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus. and that's enabling us to do technical assistance, provisioning, and deal origination for FMO into things like tiger shrimp farming in the very precious ecosystems of the mangroves in Vietnam, into a company that's exploring more saline-resistant rice production in Bangladesh in the face of increasing salinity levels there. Company in Kenya that's come up with a way to do solar cooling of horticultural produce in a country that 50% of that produce doesn't make it to market. So these are really important innovations and investment instruments in ticket sizes of between 10 and 15 million euro. So not insubstantial or inconsequential. At the same time, we at SMV, like many, many others, work on market systems development approaches, on results-based financing instruments with one program called CRAFT, which is climate resilient agriculture focused in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, enabling catalytic grant financing into about 75 small and medium enterprises in those countries. But the constraint part or the challenge part is how do we, at a time of odor constraints, how do we get those grant instruments to climb a ladder into the more innovative financing instruments? What we tend to see, unfortunately, is quite a bit of grant entrepreneurship, quite a lot of repeat grants into those SMEs, and a disconnect between the grant financing and the innovative financing in instruments such as the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development. The challenge, of course, is an obvious one. There are risk levels, risk thresholds, but also ticket sizes. And so somehow we need a better collaboration around what we call the impact capital continuum, going from your grants to your catalytic grant financing, to your blended financing, to your DFIs, and onwards and upwards. And so we need an ecosystem shift. We need to defragment, and we need to find ways to collaborate better so that when, in our cases, SNV, an FMO, for whatever reason, doesn't pick up that investment opportunity in Bangladesh or Kenya, or we hope in more fragile parts of the Sahel or South Sudan, another innovative financing instrument is able to step in. And as Alvaro, you rightly said, it's the SMEs, the engine of so many economies, who employ 70% of the world's population, who so desperately need those smaller ticket sizes, particularly in those more fragile places. So opportunities, challenges, and a real need to, for us to figure out this collaboration side. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for those insights, Simon, and a really important work that's going on the ground. But as you said, there is a need for this ecosystem shift. And this is a great segue to a city where we can hear from you. Jay, as a major player in global finance, you've been involved in various sustainability-driven investments. At the same time, you've heard what Simon has just said about the enormous challenges that we face and the need for this restructuring. What role do you see for private banks in driving this food system resilience through innovative instruments? So the instruments are out there, but what role do you see for the private banks? And can you discuss any of your forthcoming city initiatives, if nothing is yet, a secret, trade secret? Thank you.
Well, thank you for including me today. Let me just start by building on what Simon said about grants, because I do think, we still, after all this time of calling for blending, live in a world where the ODA organizations grant without blending, meaning that they give $1 away every year, year on year, and they don't structure into a transaction where you can create an enterprise on an ongoing basis where the grant serves as a risk absorption layer of capital. And this is as true in the ag industry as it would be anywhere else. So there's a capacity problem of financial understanding and a pipeline pull where year after year you're better off just granting than you are enabling the ODA teams to understand enough about finance to actually do the work to blend. And so I think we just haven't, we really have still not figured out that mousetrap. We ought to be blending we're blending barely 1%, between kind of 1% and 2% globally of ODA. That number ought to be, 3-4 times larger. But back to the question for me in terms of innovative finance, I think that without getting too financially techy, let me just give you a couple examples of things that are important. So one is a lot of the global banks that have sustainable finance objectives like Citi are best lending to local banks that bank SMEs and small holder farmers as a course of their business. And they can on lend. We can lend to them, where the use of proceeds is for them to on lend to their client base, which is small. And typically we do that with an on lending guarantee structure. So we'll have a DFC, for example, that will lend us to take it, to manage the credit risk, say in a single B or a weak double B country, a weak credit zip code, lend to that bank, and then we can get money faster to the agriculture sector. The second thing, which I think is so important, is what we call supply chain finance. And this is, if you think about it, it's, the Nestle's, the Pepsi's, the Mars's of the world that are at the top of the food chain. They're buying from all these agricultural co-ops, the small farmers, and they're critical for their supply chain. And they're at the top of the chain, and they're typically a stronger credit, right? So one of the things that we do a lot is that we will come in and help their supply chain, and the off-taker, if you will, is the Pepsi. It is that stronger credit. And by coming in and funding their supply chain, where they act as the off-taker, we've seen an extraordinary amount of work that has been done in that space, and that recipe tends to be useful. We did a transaction with Radhani, a pasta manufacturer in India, again, where they just couldn't get money to all of their suppliers in India. So the next area is working capital, and again, a lot of the problem of the small farmers in the agriculture industry is just how do they get working capital. And so we've done a number of these programs in India. Kenya is a great example, where we will lend working capital as part of a mobile finance solution. And really, the working capital solution bolts to the next solution, which is actually the alternative payment mechanisms, and the mobile wallets in the world really are a tool of transparency, of efficiency, but also an enabler of credit, an enabler for money to move in an ecosystem and to manage the risk, where that payment system, so if you connect a mobile device to a group of farmers and you lend to them, you can monitor those flows. The bank can be a part of that alternative payment mechanism or the mobile finance solution. And again, anywhere where we have been able to, Citi as a bank, connect to that alternative payment mechanism, then we seek to try and partner with the fintechs and that system to push that money down, which has all kinds of benefits for those small agro businesses that are connected. Fintech is a critical component of this, because what we're seeing is that fintech and ag tech are connecting, and the large ag players are putting private equity money and venture money into the ag tech space. And these ag tech solutions often have a certain resistance of the farmers to adopt, and an adoption challenge. When you connect that to a modern, efficient digital payment solution that allows them to purchase and partner with an ag tech provider, again, we're able to connect that innovation of ag tech to the fintech revolution and to provide that money faster. And then, of course, there are partners like IFED, like the World Food Program, where the solutions tend to be larger and creative, like the sustainability bond market, where we're either linked to a KPI or just a use of proceeds bond that's very clear with its developmental sustainability, or in this case, food security solutions. We just did a transaction with the World Food Program with Bashan in Turkey. Again, if you work with an organization that is large and able to scale purchases of agriculture, Bashan, for example, this facility was a short-term lending facility that allowed them to export supplies that the World Food Program needed. So again, by interjecting into that supply chain through either a large fast-moving consumer goods company that's a high credit off-taker, or a World Food Program at the top of the chain, we can come in and push that money down the chain. But I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. That's so fascinating to hear. Really, I mean, you've just given us such a multifaceted view of what Citi actually does, and I love the push and pull effect that you're creating. So as much as you're inducing the demand, you're also creating the access to all this financing and solutions. So that's really great, and I'd really like you to continue, but we need to move. So Elvina, with this, you've heard some of the constraints that were put out there, but you also had some of the interesting solutions that are existing. So given these significant gaps as well in transforming food systems and building this climate resilience, maybe you could share with us an example from the Impact Fund that tells us how emerging markets can effectively support small-scale producers.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dina. Pleasure to be here today. And yeah, actually, it resonated a lot, all the constraints which have been mentioned here, but obviously with constraints there are also opportunities. Maybe I will just start with a couple of words about Incofin Investment Management to give a context. So we are a Belgian impact investment company which have been around for more than 20 years now, and with a key, unique focus on emerging markets. We have been investing more than 4 billion in 75 countries since our inception, and in three core areas: financial inclusion, agri-food, and access to water. So when we talk about these key areas, it's obvious that the small producers and farmers are one of the key end beneficiaries, actually, of our investments. And yeah, it was actually challenging to find which initiatives to present today. We have quite a few of them. And for today's session, I picked up two maybe most unusual interesting ones. So one is a Fair Trade Access Fund of Incofin. It's been around since 2012. It's a fund that we built in close partnership with KWF and Fair Trade International. And the aim of the fund is to make direct investments, and that's how it was also revolutionary back then, because as you mentioned, many financial institutions prefer to pass through the local financial institutions, and we do it also through a number of our funds. But here the aim was really to make direct investments in smallholder farmers and supply chain producers in Latin America, Africa, and in several Asian countries. The model proved to be very successful, so the fund grew from initial 8 million to the current 61 million size. We are supporting actors in more than 14 crops, and we are not only supporting them with direct funding. So we are intervening as providers of working capital, of senior loans, of mezzanines. But there's also a sizable technical assistance package, which has been also mentioned, because we wanted also to make sure that we have some capital plus access, and we intervene in the areas of the improvement of the corporate governance, of the market practices, and also especially in the sustainability areas. And we also help them to obtain certifications to build. So we're really intervening here as ecosystem enablers, and we were again quite successful in doing so. And here the partnership was really key. So as I said, we started with KfW. Later on, we had a lot of other counterparties joining us. We have DFC, FMO. We had also Starbucks company. So it's diverse actors, which proves again that if you want to launch this kind of initiatives, you really need to work with very different type of counterparties. As of today, we have invested more than $500 million through this fund, and we supported 445,000 smallhold farmers in these regions. The second initiative that we launched rather recently, so it got alive last year. It's NTF, so Nutritious Foods Financing Facility. It's quite also a pioneering initiative targeting exclusively sub-Saharan Africa. And here we wanted not only support directly the smallhold producers and actors in nutritious food area, but we wanted to make sure that the end beneficiaries of their clients are also local low-income populations. So if we compare it with the previous fund, in the Fair Trade Access Fund, most of our clients there are exporters, yeah, the coffee producers, tea producers, etc. But they're in the end exporting most of their products, and so the end consumers of the products are, yeah, the different markets. Here with NTF, we wanted to make sure that the end consumers of the products produced by our counterparties are local population, low-income population. So we are talking about nutritious, affordable food here. And here again, it's an open-ended fund. We started with 11 million, and we started with anchor investor USAID. And with very close partnership, actually, we developed the whole idea and investment guidelines with GAIN Foundation, which is technical expert in nutrition area, and that was also critical to come up with the concept of this fund. So we aim with it to grow this fund up to 50-60 million. Also, we already made several investments in the target countries, and the fund also, it's interesting to mention that this fund has also some gender targets. So we aim that not less than 30% of our counterparties will be companies owned or led by women. So, and there are many other criteria, impact criteria in this fund. So yeah, and here we're talking again about the blended structure. So the fund will have a very strong TA component, again, to improve the governance, to make also improvements in the sustainability of the business models and on the products and services that they are providing. And maybe, and I'll end here, just yesterday, here at COP29, we launched our the latest initiative, which is called Incofin's Climate Smart Microfinance Fund. And this one, so with this one, we also aim to reach smallholder producers, but via local financial counterparties, as you mentioned, via fintechs, banks, microfinance sectors, leasing companies, and etc. Again, in emerging markets, we target $500 million investments in the coming years with an aim to support climate adaptation and resilience for the most vulnerable populations. So I will pause here.
Thank you so much, Elvina. I just love these sessions because we hear about so much happening, And yet, we always think that, we're not doing enough, but there's a lot going on. And I love the nutrition focus. And also, as Simon was saying, we need those enablers. And here we have some of the enablers. So it's really great to hear what you're doing. And I think we're in the right place in the NDC partnership. So this is the right place to talk. So last but not least, I'd like to now give Sean to give us his also perspective. You've heard a lot from the colleagues, and we now want to focus on outcome-based bonds. You heard President Lario talking about some of the initiatives we've done. How do you think these outcome-based bonds represent a promising innovation for channeling resources into climate resilience? And do you see any challenges and potential in expanding these bonds to broader themes like food security?
Well, let's not get too fussy about the term outcome-based bonds.
Okay.
Let's just say bonds that are contributing to the challenges we face in an overt kind of way. That particular market has grown in the last 10 years from $100 billion outstanding to $5 trillion outstanding now. And it keeps growing. We're going to hit $1 trillion issuance this year with the help of banks like Citi in doing this. The point of all of that is capital that will make a difference to long-term challenges we face while meeting short-term objectives. If you've got bonds in that particular area, as IFAD has done, congratulations for that, then there is demand out there. We have unquenchable demand for bonds that do these two things, not just the one thing out there. There are various options for the kinds of formats of bonds that can be used. Use of proceeds bonds, that's where someone like Citibank issues a bond and promises to use the money only for good of some kind. That's a use of proceeds bond. And then there are various forms of outcome bonds linked to KPIs and so on. I won't go into the details. I think the key point is capital with purpose has become mainstream globally. Of course, in the agricultural space, we have some rather big challenges. This has not been a major instrument around food and agriculture yet, except in some countries like Brazil, where we have managed to get some demand. But, let's just step back for a minute. The challenges we're trying to affect. Clearly, there's a global change in demand, which is being fueled by richer populations in places like Baku, etc. All agriculture is dealing with that. But at the same time, we're now dealing with climate impacts, climate change. Growing zones are changing. Drought, flood. Think about Spain that's been in drought for the last couple of years and is now getting these crazy floods. Volatility is the new norm. This is not very good for farmers who need consistency and so on. So how do we challenge all those things? At the same time, we've got this other thing hanging over us, which is the great hope of land, which is that we can sequester a third of the world's carbon emissions in changing land practices, mainly in soil practices. That's a big burden to put on the shoulders of the sector, but an important burden. They're the things we're doing. In what we've been doing to grow the global thematic bond market is provide clarity of what qualifies, guidance for investors, guidance for development banks or with development banks and so on. That is one critical job. Why? Because these are really big challenges. Knowing what to do is really hard. I don't know, Elvira, how much work you've done to figure out the right universe to invest in, but it's not simple. So you will find one of the key movements that underpins the green and sustainable bond market has been the growth of taxonomies. So in the land use and agriculture space, global taxonomies, we've been building them all around the world, including in China and Europe. We now have agriculture appearing in Colombia, in Brazil, in Rwanda, in Australia, in New Zealand and other countries. You will see much more guidance coming through for what qualifies. In other words, the hard work to figuring out what are the basic rules is done centrally with scientific experts in the room, not politicians, before we go out to finance and to investors and say this is the universe to invest in. Now, this idea of a universe to invest in is really important because when we started working 15 years ago on this, for most investors, and global investors represent about $130 trillion US, I'd imagine, the institutional investors. They all thought investing in climate or development and agriculture was a cost. Oh, it's going to be a cost. If I get involved with FMO, it's going to cost me more. I mean, I'd love to do it. It'd be really good. I want to save the planet, but I just can't do it. We've managed to change that for the growth of this market. Sustainable investments in the bond market, at least, are now seen as lower risk, better return in secondary markets, and they give benefits for issuers as well. The cost of capital is marginally but usefully lower. Not very good for someone who's doing $15 million, I will admit. If you're doing 1.5 billion, it's a lot of money. If you're doing a sovereign bonds, a lot of money. So we've got that far. The challenge we face now, working with IFAD and others, is greater clarity about what needs to be done given the volatility we're entering into. We can't, unfortunately, do business as usual. We've got some hope. One is that the application of capital improves productivity in most places. In fact, an FAO report of 10 years ago was talking about a 5 times productivity improvement for a doubling of capital investment in Africa. So clearly, capital markets is a big game. We know we've got institutions like IFAD, like NABARD, like Banco do Brasil, etc., that are now focusing on climate and change and want to channel cheap capital through people. We've got some good examples. In Brazil, EcoAgro at the smaller end, Suzano at the bigger end are doing exactly this, allocating capital to food production, which is sustainable. We've started, but now we need to get to the harder parts to get to. This is what Simon works on in Africa. Very challenging. The distribution of capital is not simple. I know cities doing stuff, but truly the last mile is really difficult. We need to mobilize the intermediary institution, the banks of West Africa, etc., to be able to do it. They need to get cheaper capital for programs that support sustainable food production. It's as simple as that. Rich countries can help with this because they can support the delivery of cheaper capital through development institutions like IFAD, but also through African Development Bank and direct guarantees and so on. Clarity about what we need to do. We've got to move fast. We need that sorted out quickly so all of us can run, not walk. And then incentives. Incentives everywhere. That is happening. It is starting to happen. It's not happening enough yet in food production. That's the next frontier.
Excellent sound of reason, and I think we could spend the whole day here just listening to the four of you. I would have loved to ask another round of questions, but I see we're running out of time. But a lot of you touched upon the partnerships and touched upon the need to work together and that the solutions exist, but we need to have, as was really well summed up, we need that clarity and we need also the right incentives and we need to act fast. So if you had one word on that silver bullet, okay, more than one word, but a very short interjection here, what would that be in terms of how can we move forward?
Yeah, I'll go super quick. I mean, my word, it's got to be seen as a continuum. So that's the word. I think, Sean, you just said it. And it's not, you said it's hard for the 15 million size. We're not talking the 70% of the world's economy in the SMEs. That's not, they don't need 15 million, yeah? They need between, I don't know what it is, 250,000 to maybe 2 million or something like that. And the mistake I think we're making is we're putting the grants into those SMEs in less fragile places. That's expensive, right? That's free money. There's a cost, even though it's free money, to that. We need to think about how we bring down the costs into those smaller ticket sizes so the grant money can get to those really fragile places where it's needed. But then the money that we're putting into those SMEs is still better priced than the stuff that's just not getting their way at the moment. Yeah, so the continuum, that would be my one word.
Thank you. Jay, what can we...
Yeah, I would just say it's scaling with speed because this innovation is there. But the resources that it takes, the complexity, the partnership to get these small deals done just means that we just do bite-sized pieces. And that's fantastic for the people at stake in that transaction. But it doesn't add the zeros that we need. And so it's really about how we can replicate this at scale so that you can just do much, much more of it.
Thank you. Elvina.
Yes, thank you. Well, as a private sector representative, I will just say that private sector can do and achieve a lot, and we're working very hard to do it. But we do desperately need partnerships. It's vital for us, especially in the early stages of the of our funds of initiatives. We do need strong anchor investors. We do need MDBs to partner with us, and we do need technical expertise. And once the funds is built, it's kicked off, then things can roll out and conventional investors joining us.
Excellent, thank you. Sean,
We do have a global financial system. Imagine if we could tilt that to green, tilt the whole thing to green, to focus. That's actually what we have to do to survive.
thank you. And really, please join me in congratulating this excellent panel for really these insightful remarks. I'll leave you with a few takeaway words. The one word that I needed. I heard continuum, I heard replicate and scale, I heard partnerships, and tilt to green. Thank you. Have a good evening. Would you, I think there's a question, we've run out, but very quick.
When you have a breakthrough technology, you have a strong interest for a dozen countries from Middle East to India to South America to Africa. And my question is, how can we connect to the NDC partnership?
Who would like to take that?
What's the mechanism? Exchange a
To
business
connect.
card or arrange a next
Well,
meeting, or there's some kind of a procedure?
You're in the NDC.
Process.
You're in the NDC pavilion. I think we can continue that question in the pavilion here.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you all, and a round of applause. Thank you for our panelists. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you.